So, that's the plan, P21 said skeptically as we walked along the Celestia Boulevard. It's all I could come up with, I replied, keeping my eye on the long ago looted shops and smashed cafes. We weren't quite clear of the bog or the fog banks. Scotch tape blinked up at the mists. Why is it so foggy and rainy here at the same time? Probably the Enclave, I replied, glad that it didn't obscure my EFS. I hadn't seen anything red in 15 minutes. It would make it harder for some pony to take pot shots as they fly in and out of the skyport, P21 speculated. Also, no pony would be able to track them. Yeah, but it's still depressing, Scotch Tape said, and then started as she pointed to the side. Some ponies over there. I looked at the blue bars. Relax. They're not hostile. Not yet, anyway. The bars belonged to 4 bedraggled mares and 1 buck. They had filthy sacks and patched saddlebags filled with bulging junk, more than I could imagine. Stay back, the buck warned as the mares readied flimsy shovels, pry bars, and a cracked baseball bat. They looked ready to run for their lives. No trouble, I said, making sure my guns were away. The red-eye slavers, one of the mares squealed. They found us. But the buck looked at my barding. No, that's security. At once, the 5 relaxed, and the tension left the 3 of us as well. Sorry. Never thought we'd see you. We are on our way to the Rainbow Dash Skyport, I said, trying to look as friendly as I could. You thought we were slavers? The buck cleared his throat. Ever since Red Eye took over Paradise, the slavers have been out in force. You join him willingly, and he gives you a gun and sends you to the Everfree. Otherwise, well, you disappear for good in Philadelphia. Scrapyard was completely wiped out this morning. Even with 3 VC soldiers, we couldn't fight them. VC soldiers fighting Red Eye? I gasped. Were the Enclave really doing something to help? Something that actually mattered? Well, we think when we fled, though Red Eye's griffins were all over them. I don't think Scrapyard had a chance. The buck muttered darkly. You're from Scrapyard, then? I asked, looking at their bags of junk. They nodded warily. Where are you going? The Pegasi trade food for ordinary junk, one of the mares said, sounding somewhat baffled. I squirmed inside, but seeing how slat-ribbed these 5 ponies were. Do a lot of ponies eat the Enclave food? P21 asked. It's the only food if a pony wants to avoid taint. You can eat hoppers and leeches, but you'll be tainted in a few years, the mustard-colored buck said with a clear distaste. Otherwise, it's preserved food or society food. P21 nodded thoughtfully. With taint in the water, any plants that live get contaminated. That eventually builds up to whatever eats the tainted matter. I sighed, remembering a lone dragon with the only hope that someday could rid Equestria of that poison. Why does any pony actually live in Hoovington? This place is like a butt and butt sandwich with extra butt on the side. Scotch Tape groaned. I'd go back to Gutterville, if I could. Not sure it's still there with Red Eye, but still, better than here. One of the mares opined. I had to agree, though my home was currently saturated with chlorine gas. Food, trade, medical aid, or other business? The bored puce Pegasus asked from behind her counter as we shuffled through the Skyport gate. The huge rusting hooks of several massive sky wagons formed an impenetrable wall along the remains of the chain-link fence. It took 2 Pegasi to lift a vertibuck. I could not imagine what It would take teams of Pegasi to pull one of these from Manhattan to Hoovington. I'd thought that the fog would lighten up closer to the airport that we got, but everything here was shrouded in mist so thick that you couldn't see 20 feet in front of your nose. From the blue bars on my EFS, I could tell that there was some pony overhead. It made my mane itch. Food trade, each of the ponies from Scap Yards said in a soft, respectful tone. And medical, please. The puce Pegasus pressed her lips together tightly as she issued them a green collar and red collar. Follow the green lines for the trading station. Follow the red lines for the medical station. Next! She snapped, sending the ponies following lines painted on the cracked tarmac. Then her eyes took one look at me and widened in shock. You! I trotted to the counter, leaned against it, eyes staring into hers as she stammered. Other business, I said with a grin. You can't be here. You're that terrorist, she said as she licked her lips. I could make out vague outlines in the mist atop the Skywagon hulks on either side of the gate. I'm not here to cause trouble, I said in an even, calm, civilized, not going to shoot you unless I have to voice. What are you here for, then? She asked, swallowing and looking at P-21 and Scotch tape as if they were going to suddenly pull out death rays and start blowing up things at random. I'm looking for the pony in charge. If you tell me where to go, I'll get out of your mane and let you go back to your boring everyday work. I smiled as comfortingly as possible. Okay, maybe there was just a little shootiness in my grin. She looked at two other mares processing the visitors, then swallowed and pulled out 3 yellow collars. Put these on, please. I glanced at P-21, levitated them each over our heads, then smiled at her again. My cooperation seemed to disturb her even more. Sometimes you just couldn't please a paranoid Pegasus pony. This way, she said as she left the counter and followed a yellow path painted on the ground. I had to admit it was an efficient way to manage ponies. Any pony on the wrong trail would get noticed right away. Thank you, P-21 said softly, but the puce mare jumped anyway. Come again? She asked in confusion. A vertibuck landed beside us in eerie silence, and Scotch tape gaped at the missile pods and energy cannons. He glanced at me in Scotch. Thank you for helping these ponies, he elaborated. Oh, that. Her nervousness gave way to a little irritation. You're welcome, I guess. She looked sharply at Scotch tape. Stay clear of the vertibuck, please. Something the matter? I asked, watching as the other Pegasi started to load the vertibuck with what appeared to be heaps of scrap metal and other junk. She shook her head a moment as if trying to think of something to say that wouldn't get her shot. Just not how I imagined it. Always hungry ponies, always sick, dirty, smelly, a lot of them crazy or violent, she said, then swallowed. I just thought it'd be, I don't know, different. What did she expect? A nice, ordinary stable meet? This is the wasteland. And this is the hoof. Worst of the worst. I almost got eaten by a giant frog an hour ago. A frog! How crazy is that? And before that, I was nearly eaten by a mechanical abomination. She looked a little uncertain, and I gave a half smile. So, if there's any place in all the wasteland that needs your help, this is it. It's really appreciated. She brightened a little, and while she wasn't exactly friendly, she stopped twitching at my every move. The yellow line led to the terminal, and once inside, I felt my spirits lift immensely. The perpetual fog was gloomy, even for Hoofington. Once inside, I saw a number of terminals, monitors, and, of course, Pegasi of all colors flying around a large open-aired building. Somebody had hung a banner across the Rainbow Dash part of the Rainbow Dash skyport that now read, Thunderhead. A cloud split in half by a lightning bolt motif was on every crate and terminal. There were also flaws. Most of the ponies I saw looked tired, unwashed, or strained. Weapons were of poor quality, and every pony wore threadbare uniforms. There was also a general feel of malice and frustration in the air. I saw a grand total of 3 suits of power armor, and they were looking more like they were keeping an eye on the Pegasi than looking for trouble. More than a few looked almost afraid of the scorpion-tailed armored ponies standing above them with their beam rifles. I also wasn't much of an engineer, but Thunderhead power armor looked fancier than the power armor of the Navarro Enclave. Maybe a little more flashy bits, and the shinier finish made me wonder if their armor was newer. I had to admit, the disintegration rifles following me really made me wish they weren't nearly so fancy. The Puce Pegasus led me to the office door marked security. That made me smile. Lieutenant, it's the, She glanced at me. Terrorist? The one who attacked Marimare? Terrorist? You blow up one vertibuck and suddenly every pony's convinced you're a complete monster. I muttered dryly. You did what? Scotch Tape and P21 asked in unison. Didn't I tell you about that? I blinked at their surprise. Then again, with everything I had to tell them earlier, I might have left out that little detail. They shot first, you know. I was merely defending myself, I said primly. Funny. Don't you get gelled? Didn't you geld a buck defending yourself? P21 asked. Scotch Tape gawked, covering her mouth with her hooves as she blushed and started giggling. I tried to maintain my dignified posture. That was different. I was drunk and singing. I got carried away. I do that a lot too, a mare said from within the office. The Puce mare stepped aside as I slowly trotted into the office. It couldn't be. The Navy mare behind the desk narrowed her eyes as she looked at me evenly. Sergeant Wind Whisper. I greeted her. The Puce mare stammered her farewells and quickly stepped out, closing the door once we'd entered. Behind, the sergeant flashed a dozen screens showing various sections of the skyport. I was disappointed not to see the pony I was after in any of them. It's Lieutenant. Now, though being lieutenant in the volunteer corps is like being a captain of a Griffin Dung cleanup crew. After Marimare, a lateral transition was called for by my superior, she said as she glanced at P21 and Scotch. I don't see your Dashite friend. A report was filed that she was dead, but oddly enough, every report on your activities always has you in the company of a gray Dashite with a purple mane and matching eyes. You've been spying on me. After all that you've done? She laughed. Of course. I have a pony on staff whose job is to keep track of all 5 of you. You destroyed a vertibuck with an unknown weapon of frankly terrifying destructive power. I'd be an idiot not to keep track of you, she said as she stood and trotted to the fridge to get a small wire basket of 6 sparkle colas. Not an easy job, since our last report had you in chapel yesterday, and yet here you are. I'm dying to know how you and that Dashite traveled without being detected, she said as she passed out one to each of us. Really? Chopping her mane, putting on some barding, and calling herself Fallen Glory? Yeah, I guess that wasn't the best of disguises, I agreed, rubbing the back of my head awkwardly as I popped the cap off our bottles and swept them in my pouch, adding sternly, But she's not a Dashite, Wind Whisper. She's still loyal to the Enclave. I looked at her steadily. She seemed to be staring at me. What? She frowned as she rolled the bottle back and forth between her hooves. Nothing. You just seem different. I wondered if it was the mud, the fact that I had more scars on me than a masochistic raider, or the leech holes chewed in my armor. It's the eye. Once you lose an eye, it throws everything off. The corner of her mouth twitched into a half-smile. Not that. When we first met, I thought you were an idiot. Can't imagine why, P21 muttered.